All right, good morning. My name is Jim, one of the pastors here. It's good to have you. What's up, C-Max? I don't think I've ever told you this story before. When my wife and I were discerning if we should move down to Fort Worth from where I'm from, Detroit, I got a call from a friend who was here in Fort Worth. He was an ex-ball player as well, and he was going through a divorce, and God used that phone call to help confirm the call to come down here, not knowing we were going to come here and plant a church, but just knowing that there was some ministry that God had planned for us. And so we come down, we moved down here the end of, I think 2006, November 2006, and my friend and I, really the only person I knew here, and we started doing some things together. We do a camp, we do a clinic, we had a recruiting website that we developed. We kind of did some entrepreneurial business type stuff together, and we would hang out and all of that. And so soon after, I realized that you could actually start your own church, and I was like, oh, that's what God is calling me to do, and so began to move in that direction. But he had this, we would just kind of bounce ideas off of each other all the time. And so he comes to me with this idea. It's like, hey, what do you think about this? And we kind of dialogue about it back and forth. And we have a couple more conversations about it. But then eventually he says, hey, I think this is going to be a really good idea, a really good business. Let's do this. And we kind of thought about it and prayed about it for a little while and just realized God has me going to start this church. I need to put my energy and my effort towards that. And so just kind of didn't do this thing with him. And so 12 years later, here we are in downtown Fort Worth, and we've got this wonderful church and beautiful building and all of that. But about 3 or 4 years ago, he sold that company for $1 billion. Now, granted, his ownership in the company at that point had been a little bit diluted from investors and stuff, and so his take home was only $100 million. Half of which is mine, right? So $50 million or a church, okay? Now here's the question that you need to ask on your way home. Which one is more valuable? Which one is a better investment? Obviously the $50 million is, okay? There's a lot of churches you can start with $50 million, you know what I'm saying? But I bring it up, here's why I bring it up. I bring it up because we're in part 2 of the fall of Babylon. Part 1 was last week, Revelation chapter 17. Here in Revelation 18, it's more of the fall of Babylon, and it's about the economic exploitation and allure that is Babylon. Revelation 18, it is a comfort to the poor and the oppressed and the economically exploited. To 5 of John's 7 churches. Remember, he's writing to churches, actual real churches in the first century. He's writing for us. It's for us. We can learn from this, but he's writing specifically to these actual people and actual churches. And 5 of the 7 of them had been economically exploited and persecuted, specifically in a financial way. And so for 5 of the 7 churches, it was a comfort to them, this idea of the judgment of Babylon. Now to the church in Sardis and the church in Laodicea and the church in Fort Worth, it's a warning. It's a warning. Babylon is, to the John's readers, was expressed in the Roman kingdom and in the Roman culture. That was Babylon, but it's also the Bible's code word for any culture, any city trying to build itself up without God. We said last week that Babylon is trying to build community without God, commerce without God, celebrity without God. Babylon is trying to have the kingdom of God without the king. Right? It's wanting all that heaven provides without heaven's rule. That is Babylon. And Babylon is just another one of the parodies or counterfeits that Satan is trying to produce in God's world. Right? So if you want to know what Revelation is, it's really just a satire. It's a kind of a weird book written in a weird genre of literature, apocalyptic literature, so a lot of symbolism and numbers and things like that, imagery, but it's really just a parody. It's meant to be a satire of all that Satan creates is just never quite as good as all that God is doing, right? So for example, you've got God, right? And show me first slide, go, there. So God, and God is greater than the dragon, right? Dragon is Satan. And then we have the lamb, and the lamb is just better than the beast, right? The dragon has his beast. We've said that's anti-Christian government, anti-Christian powers. That's the beast. And then the spirit is better than the false prophet, The false prophet was anti-Christian propaganda and religion and culture and things like that. And so here, the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about how the bride, the church, is greater than Babylon. That you can have a community in Babylon, or you can have a community in the kingdom of God, the church, and one is better than the other. Right? One is better than the other. And so the big choice presented to us again today, as it was last week, is will we build our life as a part of Babylon, or will we build our life as a part of the bride, the church? Now, Babylon's main seduction, what is so enticing about her is her materialism. Okay, she presents a lifestyle of more. If you have more, you'll be happy. If you have more, then you'll feel good. If you have more, what you need is more. So she's always promising more, that she alone has what you need. And remember last week, she overpromises and underdelivers. Right? She says she's gonna give you more, she doesn't, and even what she does give you does not satisfy. And so Revelation 18 is essentially a symphony of the judgment of God on Babylon. Literally, maybe not literally, in my mind, Revelation 18 is a symphony. It's made up of a bunch of songs, right? In fact, there's 4 movements in Revelation 18. There's 4 movements in a symphony. Typically in a symphony, the first movement would be the most significant, the most defining for us. It's gonna be what I just call Jesus's prophetic judgment, God's prophetic judgment on Babylon. The second movement is usually slow and lyrical in a symphony for us. It's gonna be the conductor's command. The third movement in a symphony is usually a dance. It's kind of a light, quick piece, like we're gonna move a little bit. And for us, that's gonna be really chipper time for us. The wealthy are going to weep. By the way, that's most of us. Just want you to know, most of you are wealthy. We're in America, okay? And then 4, the final movement is the grand finale. It's always the most exciting. It's fast. And for us, that's going to be what I just called the grand finale because I kind of ran out of creative things to say. Okay? And so 4 movements, a symphony of judgment on the city of Babylon so we can see how great the bride is next week, okay? The next few weeks, we're gonna see how great the bride is in comparison to the great prostitute, Babylon. And so for the first movement, in verse 1, John says, after this I saw. Right, Revelation is all about what John sees. It's not about what happens next, it's about what John is seeing next. Some people get caught up in the chronological order of Revelation. It's weird because it's not about the order of events, it's about what John is seeing next. He says, after this I saw another angel coming down from heaven. Last chapter, it was a different angel who had given him a tour of Babylon, had showed him more of who Babylon is. This is a different angel. We've actually seen this angel before. And this angel comes down from heaven having great authority, and the earth was made bright with his glory, and he called out with a mighty voice. So great authority, great glory, great voice. That's this angel. This is a big deal. Whatever he's going to say, this is a big deal. Here's what he says. Fallen is Babylon the Great. We've already met this angel back in chapter 14, verse 8, where he had said the same thing, or she, whoever, whatever, it's a spirit. So fallen is Babylon the Great. Remember, Revelation is like a Tarantino movie. It's like the movie Traffic or Crash. It's showing us the same scenes over and over again from different perspectives. And so we're seeing the same scene from chapter 14, verse 8. Here, we're just getting more layers to it. Fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling place for demons, a haunt for every unclean spirit, a haunt for every unclean bird, and a haunt for every unclean and detestable beast. This is a prophetic utterance. He's saying fallen is Babylon, even though it's going to happen in the future, though it continually happens to her. She always falls, but she will once and finally fall, and this is her future, to be a haunt for unclean things. This is just like what Jeremiah in the Old Testament wrote about her as well, Jeremiah 51:37. And Babylon shall become a heap of ruins, the haunt of jackals, a horror and a hissing without inhabitant. Right? So this great city, for all her influence, for all of her power, for all that she owns and all that she flexes, all that she has authority over, all that she has influenced, this is what becomes of her. a haunt of demons. In verse 3, it's the nations who have drunk the wine of the passion of her sexual immorality. It's the same thing as last week, where everyone else wants what she has. They want the power that she gives. They want the influence and the wealth that she gives. They want the prestige and the fame and the authority and the brand. They want what Babylon, what she says that she offers. And then the kings of the earth have committed immorality with her. That they have it. They have the influence, they have the wealth, they have the prestige, they have the power, and they got it through laying down with Babylon, sleeping with Babylon, which is why the rest of us want her too, because we want to be like them. We want the wealth and influence and power that the kings and rulers and the people in power have. But then we're introduced to a new group of people that she's influenced that we didn't meet last week, and it's the merchants. The merchants of the earth have grown rich from the power of her luxurious living. And John adds her, the vision adds the merchants, because it's introducing to us in chapter 18 this theme of her wealth, how important her exploitation, her economic exploitation is, that she is all about money and stuff, and that's what the kings and the peoples of the world want. Now, when it speaks of her being a haunt, of course, it's using it differently than the way here I want to use it in a moment. Like a haunt is a place that's typically visited it's visited often by someone. And for her, the unclean visit a lot, this city, this prostitute, Babylon. But at the same time, it just made me think of this sense of like, Babylon is haunting. The idea of being in her, the idea of being a part of this city that offers you more and says that more will satisfy. I don't know about you, but I've just found that haunting. That anytime we pursue more and more and more and more, it feels haunting, because what she promises never actually satisfies, because the very little money that you have hasn't done anything. The power or pleasure that you do get hasn't done anything, and it's haunting because we want more and it never fulfills. She overpromises and underdelivers. In fact, jump to verse 14 real quick. Verse 14, one of the songs sings, "The fruit for which your soul longed has gone from you, and all your delicacies and your splendors are lost to you, never to be found again." It's haunting. We always want more. We want more money, more sex, more stuff. It never satisfied. People with nothing want some. People with a little bit want more. People with a lot want all of it. And then one day, it's gone. And it never did its job. It never actually brought fulfillment. And our God fails us. Now, money is a god. Jesus said this. He said you can't serve both God and money. Materialism, it's a religion where we trust in it. We believe that it will do something to us, that it will help us in some sort of way. And then consumerism is our worship. So materialism is the God. If I get these things, then I'll feel happy and satisfied. Consumerism then becomes our acts of worship. We sacrifice for those things. We give of our money and our energy and our time for those things, those materials that we think will somehow bring us joy. Listen to the economic language, or rather the religious language, that this man uses in describing the way in which he thinks about money. This is from the same book I quoted last week, Lost in Transition, where they're interviewing all these young adults about how they see the world. And he says this, he says, "The good life for me would be to have more than enough money than I actually need, and to live like a kid the rest of my life. That would be my little heaven." My little heaven in today's reality. Yeah, it's consuming a lot of stuff, but if you can afford it, what is money anyway? Money is meant to be spent. You hear that religious language, though? That would be, if I had more money, more than I need, that would be like my little heaven. There's a sense of self-improvement, a sort of counterfeit sanctification that we think about when we think about money and things and stuff and power and all of that. That if we have more of it, we become a better person. It's a counterfeit sanctification. Right? We become more holy. We become better. We become a better version of ourselves. The American Psychological Association, it says this, people who chronically doubt themselves, right? Those who doubt themselves chronically and their self-worth are more inclined towards materialism than their more self-confident peers. Why? Because they think it will make them feel better about themselves. I'll give you a couple more quotes from the same book. That's why your parents did what they could do for you, and their parents for them, is to give you this stuff. We are improved. Be improved. Or how about this? Buying stuff really makes me happy. When I have a bad day or a bad week, there's nothing that makes me feel better about myself more than going and buying myself a new wardrobe. I feel like a better person. I feel prettier. I feel more intelligent sometimes, which actually sounds kind of dumb, ironically. Right? And so here's my question. The haunting of Babylon, where in your life do you see money or things or success as a sort of self-improvement? You don't want it just because it would be nice. You want it because you think it will make you better. Feel better, be better, some sort of self-improvement to your life. Where in your life do you find that? It's haunting. Right, so the first movement of this symphony is a haunting sonata. Right, it's this prophetic judgment of Babylon's future. She is going down and all of her stuff with her. Now the second movement, the conductor's command. This is actually Jesus, verse 4. Then I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, my people. Right? This is Jesus. He's saying, you are my people. Come out of her, lest you take part in her sins, lest you share in her plagues. So this is Jesus speaking to us, the church. He's saying, where you find yourself in Babylon, where you find yourself enticed by her, seduced by her, come out of her. This is a warning. This is like a parent calling to their kids in the street, get out. Right? It's dangerous there. That's going to kill you. Right? You will be destroyed if you stay there. Come out, lest you take part in her sins and share in her plagues. There is no flirting in Babylon, is what Jesus is saying. We can't have one foot in Babylon and one foot in the kingdom of God. You can't flirt with her. She's too seductive. You're too weak. Right? We need to come out of her. Any part of our heart that's in her has to come out. Again, this is Jeremiah 51:6. Flee from the midst of Babylon. Flee from her. Let everyone save his life. Be not cut off in her punishment. Don't get caught up in her when she's being destroyed. For this is the time of the Lord's vengeance, the repayment that he is rendering her. So in the Old Testament, God calls people to get out of Babylon, right, to get out. When the exiles, so God's people were taken into exile in actual historic Babylon, not the symbolic Babylon, and so he calls them, once the exile was over, to come back home to Jerusalem. Here's what's interesting. Most didn't. Most of the Jews didn't go back to Jerusalem. They stayed in Babylon. They liked her too much. Babylon had done her work. Remember last week? She assimilates us. Babylon had assimilated the people of God, and they no longer defined themselves, found their identity as the people of Yahweh. Now they are just Babylon's children or Babylon's lovers. And so they stayed in Babylon. Jesus says, don't do that. We must come out. Come out of her, my people. Now, this doesn't mean that we shelter ourselves in that kind of old school fundamentalist Christian way. That's not what the Bible is teaching. That's not what Jesus means here. Right? To come out of Babylon doesn't mean that we do the Christian thing where it's just we do only Christian things. We only listen to Christian music and Christian movies and we only watch John Crist and The Chosen and the coffee shops and we only do Christian stuff, right? That's not what it means. Jesus himself prayed in John 17. He's praying to the Father about us. He says, Father, I've given them your word and the world has hated them because they are not of the world. They are not of Babylon. They are not of the world. They are not of her, just as I am not of the world. I do not ask them that you take them out of the world, just keep them from the evil one. Right? So there's a difference between being in the world and being in Babylon. Right? Remember, Babylon isn't the whole world. Babylon is an ideology. She's a culture. She's secularism, she's humanism, she's American Christianity light. That's who Babylon is. She's every city and culture trying to build themselves up without God. And so the idea of coming out of her then is to ask yourself this question: where in my heart is there still some allegiance to her? See, like, this isn't in my notes, but I need to say this. Some of you, you're not devoted to Jesus. You like him, you believe in him, mentally, theologically, philosophically, you assent to the idea of what Christianity teaches. The life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. You have no devotion to God. And I just want you to know, your heart is going to go somewhere. And Babylon is seducing. And if I was to guess, there's a large part of your heart that is devoted to her and not him. Well, how do you come out of Babylon? By stirring that fire, whatever flame that you have for Jesus, stirring that up so that it would light a flame, the devotion of your heart towards the one true God, who alone will satisfy. And some of you, like, it's that simple. There's just not a clear pursuit of the living God. Like, just walking to church every once in a while and like claiming to be Christian isn't enough. She's too strong out there. All right, so I mean, we beat the drum of Paradox 365, not because those 2 chapters in the Bible that we read together in some sort of journal that we made up is like magic, but it's just something about stirring the flame of our devotion to God through his word and through prayer. It's just vitally important, vitally important. Some of you are getting eaten up by Babylon just because you don't really put much work in flaming the fire of your devotion and love to Jesus. I was praying back here when we were singing. I have no time for this. But I'm going to take the time. I was praying back there when we were singing, just against any sense of like hesitancy for you to sing. You have to sing. Singing, it's the thing. Man, I've got to tell my wife I love her. I need to look her in the eyes and you know, whisper those sweet nothings, right? You got to flame that fire. Come on. Right, Coleman? I mean, we got to sing. We got to flame. We got to fan that flame. Okay, where am I? I'm on date night right now. Hold on. In verse 6, right? Why do we come out? Why do we need to come out of her? Verse 6, she's going to get paid back. Okay, verse 7, she's getting the like measure of her torment. Verse 8, in a single day this is going to happen. It's going to be quick, right? The judgment on Babylon is going to be quick. So here's what Jesus is saying. Don't drink her Kool-Aid, right? Don't believe her lies. Don't chase after her money and stuff. You're fooling yourselves if you don't think she's the air that we breathe. So it's her culture is strong, okay? So breathe in deep the gospel of the kingdom of God. Even if it doesn't make you healthy, wealthy, powerful, influential, because only the bride will last. Babylon is going down. Come out of her, okay? So it's the conductor's command. That's the second movement. Here's the third. The wealthy weep, right? Babylon has fallen, and so the wealthy weep. Starting in verse 9. And the kings of the earth who committed sexual immorality and lived in luxury with her will weep and wail over her when they see the smoke of her burning, her judgment. They will stand far off in fear of her judgment and say, or feel of her torment and say, alas, alas, you great city, you mighty city Babylon, for in a single hour your judgment has come. And so Babylon has fallen, and so the wealthy weep. There's 5 dirges here in this third movement, right? So there's the kings, and then the merchants are gonna sing their little dirge, and then they'll sing another one, and then the shipmasters are doing it, and then they're all kind of mourning and lamenting over Babylon's judgment. And typically in the third movement of a symphony, it would kind of be fun and quick and a little bit of a dance. And this is more of a funeral song. And yet, that's how I read it. I actually think this is satire, and we're meant to kind of sing this like I think about the Mumford and Sons, okay? It's, like kind of like it's banjos and, kind of foot stomping, kind of music here. One commentator calls this a prophetic taunt song. That in a sense, we're mocking Babylon. Right, we're mocking Babylon and those who would follow her. So this is kind of a happy song. In fact, Mumford & Sons has a song called Babel. And it sings like this: like the city that nurtured my greed and my pride, I stretched my arms into the sky. I cry, Babel, Babel, look at me now. Then the walls of my town, they come crumbling down. Right, in that like kind of voice that he has, that it sounds like a goat is swallowing a violin. You know what I'm saying? I was gonna try to sing it, but I just can't, I mean, there's a violin right here. I could have tried, but yeah. And so the kings of the earth, they lived in luxury with her, verse 9. Right? Verse 10, the great city falls in a single hour, and then the merchants are mourning for her. Why? Because nobody buys their stuff anymore. They're mourning, they're singing this funeral dirge because nobody's gonna buy all of their stuff: gold, silver, jewels, pearls, everything. It reminds me of Acts 19, in fact, when Paul, the Apostle Paul, goes in and he plants a church in Ephesus, which is one of the 7 churches that John is writing to in Revelation, actually. And this church plant was so strong, like it was so influential, that it actually affected the economy of the city in Ephesus. So here's what happens. I'll read it to you. Acts 19, verse 23. About that time, there arose no little disturbance concerning the way. Christians, that was what they were called, the way. For a man named Demetrius, a silversmith, who made silver shrines of Artemis, one of the goddesses that they would worship in Ephesus, brought no little business to the craftsmen. These he gathered together with the workmen in similar trades and said, "Men, you know that from this business we have our wealth. And you see and hear that not only in Ephesus, but in almost all of Asia, this Paul has persuaded and turned away a great many people, saying," crazy, "that gods made with hands are not gods." Verse 27, "And there's danger not only that this trade of ours may come into disrepute, but also that the temple of the great goddess Artemis may be counted as nothing, and that she may even be deposed from her magnificence, she whom all Asia and the world worship." When they heard this, they were enraged and were crying out, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians." And so the city was filled with confusion, and they rushed together into the theater. And so there's a riot in Ephesus because the economy is stirred up and actually altered because of the church being faithful in the city. And so the merchants, they lament the fall of Babylon. Everyone who was sleeping with Babylon is weeping and mourning and lamenting because their joy and their comfort and their security were in her and not in God. Right? This was emotional for them. Right? To quote Big Worm from the movie Friday, "Playing with my money is like playing with my emotions." Right? They couldn't hear because you were screaming. Playing with my money is like playing with my emotions. Right? This is emotional. Like, you are so tied in emotionally to what you have that when it's taken from you, there's something that happens in you. It's not just, "Oh, I don't have that anymore." It's like, who am I? Who am I? Who are my people? Am I any good anymore? It's an emotional attachment. And so the movement 3, the wealthy, they weep. Why? Because they're tied to Babylon, and Babylon's going down. And then movement 4, the last one, the grand finale. The angel comes, a mighty angel, takes up a stone like a great millstone and throws it into the sea. This is like a acting parable, a symbol. This grand stone gets thrown into the sea and displaces everything. So now in Babylon, there will be no more anything. Right? This judgment displaces all that she offers. What she promised us, she now can't give us, even though even what she had promised didn't really do much for us anyways. And so it displaces everything. There's gonna be no more music, right? No more music, no more craftsmen to build all their cool things and stuff. There's no more food in the mill. There's no more light. There's no more weddings. That means no joy, no celebration, no dancing. Right? In contrast to Revelation 21, which is the bride, right? The New Jerusalem, this other city coming down from heaven that has all those things. Babylon will have none of those things. Why? Because the bride is better than Babylon. The bride is forever. Babylon is being judged. Remember back when we studied the 7 churches back in chapter 2 and 3, the Roman culture and the Roman economic system had persecuted the Christians in these 7 churches, or at least in 5 of the 7. They were ostracized because they didn't participate in the various trade unions. You had to be a part of a union to participate in your particular business or trade. And to be a part of that union, you would take part in these feasts, and they were worship feasts. Because you had a god. There was a god of the leather workers and the god of those who made tents, and there was a god of the stonemasons. There was a god that was over your particular business, and you had to appease that god for your business to be successful. And so you would all get together and have a big party and drink a lot of wine and make sacrifices to your god. It usually led into sexual immorality and some other kinds of just, gross, obvious sins. And so Christians who were trying to be faithful to Christ couldn't take part in those things. And so that affected their ability to make money, right? They were ostracized from their particular business communities. And so Christians then couldn't afford to have much food. They couldn't afford to go to Taylor Swift concerts. They couldn't afford to buy the things that everybody else was buying. They couldn't afford even IKEA, right? And so God judges Babylon and takes away all that stuff away from Babylon and is going to give it to the church. In verse 24, it says, in her, in Babylon, was found the blood of prophets and of saints, right? That's the persecution of the church, but then also all who had been slain on the earth. So remember last week, we talked about how Babylon is being used by the beast to persecute the church, right? The beast, Satan and his governments and powers and people of influence that are trying to keep the church from being the church and persecute the church for what she believes. He's using Babylon to hurt us, to persecute us, okay? And so that's why she's being judged. But we also learned last week is that she ends up, the beast ends up turning on her. And evil begins to devour evil. And in fact, how God ends up judging Babylon is just that the beast turns on her and evil kind of takes evil down. We see that here, right? We see that here, that in her was found the blood of the prophets and the saints, but also all who have been slain on the earth. So last week we talked about the exploitation of Babylon towards the church with big pharma, big porn, big gambling, big media, things like that. Well, we are the victim, we are the target of her exploitation, but guess who else gets taken down in that? Everybody else. Everybody else is exploited in the same way, and evil begins to destroy evil. That's the idea. And so then the song ends. Song's over. This kind of satirical symphony of the judgment of Babylon. And what's interesting is Revelation 19 next week is another symphony and another few songs, but guess who gets to sing this song? And it's a new song. We do. Yeah, we get to sing the song. It's our symphony next week, okay? So what do we do about all this? How should we think about this fall of Babylon? Let me ask us to consider two things. One, economic exploitation, and two, economic allure. Okay, we're gonna talk about money. Economic exploitation. It was often said of Rome, who the first church, the first readers, when they read Revelation, they thought of Rome, right? They were in the Roman kingdom. It was often said of Rome that she conquers as much through her merchants as she does through her armies. If you were to read Confessions of an Economic Hitman, you would recognize that that kind of stuff still happens today. If you even believe, again, half of some of these kind of autobiographies and documentaries and memoirs and such, that nations, they use the economy to put other nations and peoples under their power as much as we might use our armies to do so. I'll give you an example of Rome. It was said in Rome to maintain stability in the capital. What Rome did is they distributed wheat free to its residents in the capital of Rome, but at the expense of the overtaxed peasants in Egypt, who at one point were their own kingdom, who had to raise all that grain. And so the Egyptian peasants around the fertile Nile, who were able to cultivate all this wheat to fund Rome, they now had to send a large amount of their produce there, and yet their peasants lacked the resources now to feed themselves. And so possibly up to 1/3 of their own children would die each year of malnourishment, not being able to eat, and most families were crowded into small dwellings. They were feeding Rome, but starving Egypt to do it. It's exploitation, economic exploitation. Babylon is all about money and power, and she exploits to get it. Remember, she has nothing of her own. The dragon has no creativity of his own. He can't produce anything on his own. Everything that they do, it has to be a parody, a counterfeit, or stealing from what God has made. Satan can't do anything, can't produce anything, right? All Satan does is steal, kill, and what? Destroy. And so we talked last week about big media, big gambling, big porn, big pharma, these ways in which the beast and the prostitute exploit us. We could spend a whole nother hour talking about the elderly and the exploitation of the elderly in our day. We could talk about how people are exploited with credit cards and how they work. We could talk about bank runs when we have a fractional reserve banking system. We could talk about prosperity preachers in our own town, right? In our own city, famous preachers who have exploited thousands and thousands of people for decades, and exploited them financially. That is the prostitute's work. I could tell you a story of a couple in New York who had a baby. Okay, they had a baby. It's funny, but it's sad. They had a baby. They didn't name the baby, okay, because they auctioned the baby's name off on eBay to the highest bidder. Right, so you could advertise your name, it's just how much, and here's why. They wanted to buy their dream house, right? So it'd be like, hey, this is my kid, Target. This is my daughter, Affleck, and those are interesting names. What's going on? Well, we have a nice house now. And, right, this is the exploitation of our children, of our kids, right? It's interesting even that they, in this long list of commodities, in the one particular song, the Merchant song, at the end, it lists slaves, that is human souls, right? As a commodity, as people are being exploited. And of course, people have always been exploited. The Romans at this time, they had 10 million slaves. About 20% of the Roman kingdom were slaves, and they became slaves for all sorts of different reasons. War, debt, parents would sell their children to make money, not unlike this New York couple that were selling the name of their baby, kidnapping unwanted children exposed to the elements. So they didn't know how to abort their children, so they would have the children and then just leave them outside to die. And it's here on this list of the merchants of the earth mourning all that, no one will buy from them anymore. Nobody's gonna buy our gold, nobody's gonna buy our slaves anymore. And so they're mourning about it. And I bring this up because I doubt anyone here would be okay with slavery. I've never actually heard anyone confess to being a racist, okay? Which is interesting because I've heard a lot of confessions. Nobody's ever racist, right? Nobody ever confesses to being racist. But here's what else I've never heard. I've never heard anyone confessing to greed. And I bring it up because it's not just racism or hatred that leads to the slavery of people groups or peoples. It's also greed. I've never heard anyone confess to the sin of greed. The men who founded the South in America and thus slavery in the South, they were actually the sons of another English colony, Barbados. It was a wealthy island, and it was founded on a slave system, Barbados was. And it was the most brutal in the world. And it was very densely populated. It's an island. And so the sons of these slave owners, they ran out of land and property on the island when they came of age to have children and families and things like that. So they came to this new world. And they founded the Deep South. And they wanted what their parents had had. They wanted the kind of power and money and wealth and influence. And so they did the same thing. They built their wealth off the backs of black slaves. And it wasn't hatred at first against a particular color or nation or culture. How they built their utopia was built off of greed. They wanted power. They wanted money. They wanted stuff. It is greed that leads to the exploitation of poor labor workers in our day, in our world today. And so here's my question. Have you ever repented of greed? Because greed, when it keeps growing and is not repented of, it ends up leading into some terribly destructive things. Greed. Never heard of anybody confess greed. Never heard of anybody had to repent of greed. Never heard of the city group gathering where people are weeping over their greed. Why? Because it's so in the air that we breathe, we don't even recognize greed in our own heart. Have you ever repented of greed? Economic exploitation, how about economic allure? 5 of the 7 churches were facing economic persecution in Revelation. So they were facing economic persecution, which means the allure of Babylon was tempting. If they would just cave a little, if their convictions were just, forgotten for a moment, if they were a little squishy in their faith, if they kind of did that thing where they privatized their faith, but then in public it was kind of separated from them, right? It was like, I'm a Christian here on a Sunday, but out in the world I gotta be, I gotta figure things out. I've got mouths to feed, Pastor. And so we're a little squishy out of the, outside of the church walls, but in the church we're, oh, Jesus, you're great, but outside I don't quite trust him. I gotta make sure I make my money. If they were to do that, right, not be too vocal about being a Christian, if I could make a few more bucks, that was the temptation because of the allure of Babylon. And their choice is the same choice before us. Is it Babylon or the bride? Is it this community of finance or this community of faith? Do we choose a life of greed or a life of generosity? And it's hard because it's that, $50 million sounds like a better thing to do than to start a church. Seems like I could have more influence and more power and more ability, and we justify all of those things if I just had a little bit more. If I just had a little bit more, I could buy the car. If I just had a little bit more, I could have this particular house. If I just had a little bit more, I could dress in the particular way that the ladies dress when they go to these luncheons. If I could just have a little bit more, then my kids could go to this school. If I could just have a little bit more, then I could be seen in this kind of light. If I just had a little bit more, I could do really good things for the kingdom of God. As if Jesus needed your money. As if Jesus was like, man, the dude went to TCU, he graduated, he's super successful. I really wish he was on my team. And you know what? I'm gonna help him out and give him a lot of money so that, he would give it back to me. It doesn't make any sense. Jesus has so much in his back pocket, he needs nothing from you. Nothing from you. You want something, you should ask Jesus for it. He doesn't need you. Right? Your generosity, your open-handedness, your devotion to him and not to your money, that's for your sake. Right? When a church asks for your money, it's because we don't need it. Jesus has so much money. We don't need your money. You need to give your money. You need to do these things, to open your hands to the thing, to take your grip off of the things that have a grip on you. They have a hold on you. Let go. Come out of her. That's a big deal. Here's where I'm really haunted. This is what's been haunting me lately. What do we teach our children with our practices? Like how we think about money, how we participate in the consumerism of our day. It just haunts me, right? It haunts me. Are my children being formed towards Babylon or towards the kingdom? Let's be honest, I don't know. I don't know when it comes to money, I don't know. The pull is so strong. It's so easy for them to see, participate in, enjoy the things of Babylon than the things of the kingdom. Right? They don't get to we gotta figure out ways. We gotta figure out ways of here's why we give to the church and how much and why, and here's what that gives us. Here's what we get to participate in and experience because of that. And here's, another, stuffy for your bed. And it's nice, but it's gonna, the dog's gonna eat it tomorrow. Yeah, it haunts me what we're teaching our kids in regards to finances. This doesn't seem like a big deal. I mean, like, what's the big deal about greed? What's the big deal about money? Are you wanting us to, should we be a third world country? I mean, this is just, we're part of a wealthy country. What's the big deal? What is a big deal? The first commandment is, thou shalt not have any other gods before me. Right, so I think the temptation is like, oh, this isn't, homosexuality. This isn't some terrible sin. No, this is a breaking of the first commandment. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Jesus said, the cares of the world and the deceitfulness of riches and the desires for other things will enter in and choke out the word, and it will prove unfaithful. What will take you out, Jesus says, more than anything, is money. Truly I say to you, only with difficulty will a rich person enter the kingdom of heaven. You want to make Christianity harder? Make more money. You want to make Christianity harder? Become more powerful. Have a better brand. Grow in influence. Grow in celebrity. That'll make Christianity really hard. Really hard. And so here's just my question. Are you a good investment for God? Like, if you were God and you looked at your way of money and the things you buy and what you do with it and your generosity and all of that, if you were God, would you give you more money? Are you a good investment for God? Or do you have one foot in Babylon and one foot in the church? The only way to rid yourself of the love and hold of money is to let it go. Here's our hope. Babylon seems too big. She seems too influential. She seems too strong. She seems too pervasive. She seems everywhere. How do we get away from her? How do we get away from her? How do we get her out of our heart? I think that's the question. How do we get Babylon out of our heart? How do we get out of her? How do we get her out of us? I want you to remember John, he's writing all of this, and remember where he is. He's dirt poor, on an island, incarcerated because of what he believes. He's basically in jail, has nothing, and he has the audacity to say Babylon is going down. He's talking about the Roman kingdom. The Roman kingdom, Babylon, is going down. How does he have the audacity to say this? How do we have the audacity to say, I'm going to get out of her because the bride is better? Well, where are the Egyptians in their empire? Where are the Assyrians in their empire? Where are the Romans in theirs? All of these many Babylons have been destroyed. The church is everywhere. The church is thriving. In closed countries, thriving. Right? The American church, you've got some questions about her and doubts about her. I do too. The church in Iran, it's doing great. The church in China, killing it. Under persecution, under the hand of the first beast, the anti-Christian powers, thriving. Why? Because of verse 8. Verse 8. For this reason, her plagues will come in a single day. Death and mourning and famine. Babylon, she will be burned up with fire. Why? For mighty is the Lord God who has judged her. He's mighty. Babylon's really strong. We're pretty weak, but our God is mighty. See, think about the economic language of the gospel. Like, bound up in Christ are the inexhaustible resources of everything. Right? And the Bible speaks of the riches of his kindness in Romans 2, and the riches of his glory in Romans 9, and the riches of his grace in Ephesians 1, and the unsearchable riches of Christ in Ephesians 3. Our God's loaded. He's got all that we would need, every bit of grace, every bit of mercy, every bit of stuff, every bit of money, anything we need, our God has. He is mighty. And the invitation to us to come out of her is also an invitation to buy from God. What Babylon offers us will not satisfy. What Jesus gives to us for free will. Isaiah 55. Here's God's invitation to us. Come, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters. He who has no money, come, buy and eat. Come, buy wine and milk without money, without price. Why do you spend your money for that which is not bread and your labor for that which does not satisfy? What Jesus offers us is free, and it will satisfy. And so, Father, I ask that you would just meet us in this place that we're in right now, that you would convict us of greed, that you would convict us of where in our hearts we are still bound to Babylon. I gotta pray against the enemy's lies even right now, who would say, what you offer us isn't free. What you offer us is something I have to pay for. I'm not worthy of your grace. I'm not worthy of your mercy. I'm not worthy. I just pray against those lies right now. That we would receive the free grace of God. And we would freely invest, devote ourselves to you and the kingdom of God. God, would you help us? Amen.